and welcome to this discussion about the accelerated digital transformation and the changes that we are seeing in the workplace. My name is Huraira bin Suhail, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. I'm joined by an illustrious panel, and we start with Tom Mew, who is the Managing Director for PTS Consulting. We have Jacques Long, who is the head for display and brand memory at Samsung, and we have Eric Tanuwijaja, who is the Senior Manager for the display office at Samsung. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to jump right into it with the first question. COVID-19 and the global pandemic has caused a lot of disruption. We've experienced it personally, from lockdowns to social distancing. I want you to really put into context what the real impact has been of this disruption on the workplace.
Well, first of all, Huraira, I want to say thank you to Inavate and also to Samsung for the kind invitation to speak at this illustrious panel. And it's a great question. But before I dive into my answer, what I do want to say is I'll put a challenge to the panel here that anyone who uses the phrase new normal, right, that's going to be $10 in the pot, right, for lunchtime laxer, all right?
All right.
But I think to answer the question in terms of disruption in the workplace, what we're looking at in terms of workplace design consultants who help our clients design the AV and the IT in their spaces, we've found the kind of disruptions to be in the areas of obviously people, technology, and space. From a people perspective, we know that people are unique and it's very difficult to create a one-size-fits-all solution. And the biggest disruption in terms of people is the fact that with everyone being remote, there's a slow take-up now of what are we going to do in terms of people returning back to the offices. And it's a unique answer for people all around the world because organizations are unique, businesses are unique, and as I said before, people are unique as well. But you're going to find a proportion of folks who want to be permanently working remotely, that's a given. A proportion of people who, for either business reasons or personal reasons, want to stay in the office, work full-time in the office, but you're going to have the hybrid workforce, being those who are the proportion of working from remotely and coming into the office for certain occasions. A big disruption that I've seen in terms of those people, though, is the fact that it's so much more difficult now to keep connections. Right. And when you're in the office, it was very easy to have establish strong connections with people who you work very, very closely with day to day. But it's the folks with whom you have maybe relatively weaker connections, where now you've lost that opportunity to just have that chat with the person who you might not necessarily be in your favorites list in the phone book. So that's a big disruption that we need to support and help in terms of strengthening those connections. Obviously, from a technology perspective, it's massively underpinning now how we maintain those connections and how we keep that culture going. And from a space perspective, obviously, there's a lot of unknowns out there. I think it's a really exciting time to be in our industry right now because there's no concrete answer out there. Again, because of how unique things are, it's still a case of testing, proof of concept testing to see what could work for your organization, what could work for your business, and what works for your people. So they're the kind of disruptions that we're seeing at the moment, and there's a lot of opportunity and exciting times out there for us all.
Jacques, if you could share your thoughts.
Sure. So I think my personal view is like when we first have the lockdown in a lot of countries, one of the observation that we have is that there is a sudden increase in the spike of a purchase for certain technology products. So the notebooks, the network routers, the mesh routers, the PC monitors, and even headset devices. So I think everyone is rushing to equip themselves to stay connected. So I think this pandemic has certainly accelerated the remote working. And consequently, because of this remote workforce that we have now, we are faced with certain challenges. How can the employees be effective? And when we look at it, it comes down to two senses really, so which is sound and sight. So a lot of dependency on the effectiveness comes down to sound and sight. which means that how audio and visual technology to be integrated into the solutions for effective remote working comes into play. So I think from the past few months as we experience, very often in meetings we hear, can you see? Can you see? Can you hear? Can you hear me? So that is the first experience that we get. Yeah. So I think this is very much the disruption. But at the core of this, which is about the workspace, be it a hybrid workspace in the virtual environment or the physical environment, I think the focus remains unchanged, which is to stay connected. Yeah.
Eric?
I think these two gentlemen have summed up the impact of COVID beautifully, right? I think I will just add on to what Tom's have built up in terms of people and space. So I think, in my opinion, for people, there's a digital gap pre-COVID to what they are doing now through telecommute, right? In terms of first, productivity, right? You can't get the same level of standards when you work in your traditional, conventional workstation in office versus your home, that's for sure, right? So I think this is the biggest impact for individuals like myself to actually build the same working experience at office and at home, right? Second, I think it's about collaborations. I think Tom pointed out a very good point whereby the engagement level, how actually people could have sharing ideas easily, face-to-face meetings, but through all these digital means of communications, there are some lacks of engagement, some lacks of communications due to the lack of face-to-face level of details, right? Third, I think in terms of the communications, right? I think in overall, communication in sense whereby pre-COVID, people just, you have any idea, just walk over to someone's desk and talk about it. But now you can't, right? You have to do either audio calls, video calls, and certainly there is a lot of things ongoing that is lost in translation, missing communications. Like exactly what Jacob said, can you see, can you hear? Right? I think this is the common problems that we face as an individuals, as a people, right? And for space, we see a problem with managing your existing office, right? I think office is here to say, we have no idea when COVID will end, but eventually people will move back to office for sure, right? So I think it's a challenge for companies, for organizations to ask themselves, what should I do with my office space? How should I maximize it? How should I make sure that it is sustainable for post-COVID era, right? So I think the idea of having the hybrid workforce, hybrid working models, flexible workspace, how you make use of spaces that is not meant for meeting, but you have to turn that into a meeting space because of the safe distancing protocols, to make sure that it's a healthy environment for people to work with. I think all these are real impacts of COVID in workspace.
Some really interesting points raised by the panel, and what I would like to delve into is the hybrid workforce. It seems that people were able to adapt to the restrictions of working in COVID-19 much quicker than spaces, right? Let's take our corporate office, for example. We have evolved, our working styles have changed, we're the hybrid workforce now, but our spaces are still pretty much similar to what they were pre-COVID. What can be done to bridge the gap?
Well, I think to answer that question, as I said, there's going to be a lot of testing. There's a lot of trial and error to see what works for a particular industry and a business, and also to cater for people. But I think being open to the fact that spaces need to be flexible. The flexibility in the workplace needs to be underpinned by a strategy. That strategy being having flexible infrastructure network from a network perspective, from a cabling perspective, so that we're not talking about changing spaces on a daily basis, but seeing what works after an extended period of time, and then maybe you can then reconfigure the space to improve that experience without expensive, abortive works. I think it's really important to make sure that, in a space, the remote audience feels engaged. Nowadays, we've all kind of accepted that remote working. People have been, dragged kicking and screaming now into being used to using technology to support those experiences. but having technology that allows equal participation in the rooms so that, let's say we're in a 4-person meeting room and there's the 4 of us here physically in the space, but you've got potentially a lot more people connecting in remotely. We need to make sure that, let's say Jacobs and I, we break out into a sideways conversation, that engagement isn't broken. So we need to make sure that we have we cater for that in what we build. And finally, it's having a strategy, a long-term strategy in terms of what do we want to do to make sure those spaces support that flexibility in the future. There's the case of integrating multiple technologies together. I mean, the simple act of just trying to arrange people to be in the same place at the same time, remotely and in person. Technology needs to help us do that. Booking systems and that kind of thing. Maybe overlaid with a community application. That coherent strategy, thinking, medium, long term, to cater for the flexibility, to cater for what kind of products and solutions you want within your environment. These are some of the things you need to think about in terms of bridging that gap.
I think to add to what Tom has said is like, because we talk about the hybrid workforce, right? So with the hybrid workforce, we are now looking at what then is the work environment that is needed. So with a hybrid workforce, we are really looking at people working from home, people working from office, people maybe even working from a Starbucks, or even some restaurants, or maybe some entertainment locations. Even if the employees is not working from home in office, potentially they may be engaging with people who are working in one of these remote locations. So again, I think really is that how is the hybrid workforce or the hybrid workspace to be redefined or to be reconfigured? So that really plays a part. So in the industry, I think the most talked about conversation now is how is VC enabling this engagement and collaboration portion. But I think we should not forget about others remote working tools like chats, like project management software, like file storage. There are a lot of other tools that is also required to make this engagement effective. So with that said, I'd like to give a little bit of perspective from a display view. If we look in terms of the gaps for individual now working at home, to effectively work from home, there's now an array of new applications that's required to do that. So now you have multiple application windows appearing on your screen, right? So what is needed now is then really an increase in the display real estate, right? If we look in terms of having meetings in rooms, right? So because of safe regulations, Tom mentioned that there'll be a reduce in the number of seats, and how then can meetings be effective? So I like to think that from a display perspective, we really need to look at the mobile interactive board, whereby you can bring the meeting rooms to the employee. So if we even look at larger meetings like town halls, right? So are we then asking the question, should meeting rooms be converted to studio so that you can do a live broadcast? So I think these are really some of the questions that a lot of organizations are going to ask themselves, and to look into is these are the plans that they're going to, initiatives that they're going to implement for the coming months or for the year ahead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As you were saying, Jacobs, if you're looking at a space where today we have to maintain social distancing, it could be a time, in the future after, things like, the cure or a vaccine is out there, and the situation could change. We're going to need to potentially reconfigure that space.
Right.
If there's a strategy behind it, and you've already thought potentially accepting that, you might have additional points, designed within that space. A flexible infrastructure where you can reconfigure that space easily to cater for what the new way is. We might be able to sit a little bit closer, Jacobs, in the future. You never know.
That's true.
Right. I'd like to add on to the point. Okay, besides the flexibility and having a bigger screen real estate, I think the key for customers and clients that coming to us, Samsung, the key question is like how could we elevate the experience of engagement, not just with the internet stakeholders, but as well as like external clients, partners, right? So just like the case of today, we could make use of like a digital LED screen to add on some contrast to the digital gap that we have to make sure that we deliver better information to our audience. Same kind of mindset came, of our customers and clients come to us asking, how, Samsung, could you propose the solutions? How could we improve our workplace? All right, so I could draw a few examples, if you may. First is always at the boardroom situations, right? So we have a lot of in particular, big MNCs coming to us. We have our boardroom that have to be utilized almost every day compared to pre-COVID, right? We have critical business decision makings, right? We have to scrutinize documents over video calls, right? With all the different workforce at different country across the region, right? We can't do that. We used to be able to travel there, scrutinize the documents, talk about business, and having a face-to-face get it done. But that experience no longer allowed in this current pandemic, so we need a solution, Samsung. So that's when we actually propose to convert your boardroom to a big real estate screen in the form of LED that can show high resolution screen with the exact details that you require for your decision making, right? Same goes with Flip, how to add like portability to your displays to make sure that the meeting room go to the employees instead of employees going to the meeting room, right? So I think these are all at the core of every workplace digitalization effort. It always revolves a good display. I think that is one baby step to actually bridge the gap for the hybrid workforce, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and I think a really big part of it as well is, as I said before in the first question, making sure that those connections remain in place as well. You know, like we're engaged with our remote audience, and you know, we need to think about things like something as simple as, you know, turning our back to someone in, you know, in the remote audience. These are things that we've got to be, you know, very mindful of.
Yeah.
So to keep those folks engaged and making sure that the audio is clear as well. We know that we're well lit. We're in a fantastic studio right now. Obviously, that's not really a problem, but in a more day-to-day environment, it's being very mindful that we have within this flexibility, and we bring in these displays, we keep that connection with everyone in the room physically and virtually.
Yeah, and basically you've hit the nail on the head, guys. What I've experienced myself is that the far end has not been in our thoughts for a very long time, and because of the fact that, you know, we've had to experience lockdown and stay at home and work from home, right? The far end has now just zoomed up in importance, and people are trying to elevate their experience of working from home. How can we start doing that?
Okay, so if I can take the question,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, one of my personal experience going into the virtual meetings is this, is like, I'm using a 49-inch ultra-wide monitor, but some of my team members are using 24-inch and some others are using 27, and some is just on the laptop. So, so when the PowerPoint or when the Excel spreadsheet is being brought up, so the first question again is that, can you see? Can you see? So for me on the 49-inch ultra-wide is that, yes, I can see perfectly fine, right? So, but obviously someone who's on just a laptop, you know, the font size and such would be too small.
The answer there, though, surely to give anyone who, you know, participates with Samsung these 49-inch monitors, right? Sounds like a good idea.
I'll be happy to. Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned earlier on as well, to enable effective engagement, there's a lot of new application that's required, new tools that's required to stay connected and to stay engaged. With that said, what used to be effective working on a PC monitor or a notebook, I believe would no longer be so. So you do need to have multiple monitors so that you'll be able to lay out the information according to your workflow. And I do believe as well is that when we talk about the dependency on two key human senses, which is sound and visual, you need the central device to be able to connect multiple devices together so that the desktop or the work area will improve in terms of clutter. Yeah. So I think last but not least, what I'm seeing as well is like as the workforce becomes more mobile, working across the different environment, there is also a need for the seamless setup or the seamless engagement into communication. So to be able to have a smart monitor that turns on into a VC mode step just seamlessly would be important. To have the mobile phone to be able to dock quickly to the display would be important, right? So, and even in larger meeting rooms, how then do you wirelessly connect to a screen? And having multiple contents or devices being displayed on a big screen for collaboration now becomes important, rather than looking for where's the HDMI cable, oh, I don't have a HDMI, I need a micro HDMI and such.
Yeah.
So I think the wireless presentation comes into play as well.
Absolutely, and you know, we're being asked by our clients to look into, as I said before, proofs of concept and testing. And one of the key words for that applies to what you've been talking about is a frictionless experience. You talk about elevating the experience between, you know, a home and you know, into the workplace. As I mentioned before, having a strategy around what it is you want to do medium term and long term, that's one key to it. But the frictionless experience, and what Jake is you're referring to there is, you know, making sure that, you know, starting up of a meeting, it's not, hello, can you hear me? No, we can only see up your nose. You know, those kind of things. It's a series. It's an education. It's a cultural thing. You know, when we used to meet face to face, all right, I would never consider a case where you and I are talking face to face, and I'll just pick up my phone and start reading my emails while we're talking, right? So, but in a remote situation, it's very possible that the person remotely is, you know, checking their emails as well as. There's a bit of, you know, cultural education that has to happen there as well. But these are the kind of challenges that we need to address. But a strategy around flexibility and also that frictionless experience is something that we really need to consider.
Yeah. Totally agree. I think I will just add on to the communication elements. I think this is always undervalued. I think that there is stark differences when you are leveraging a big screen for your video conference call, where you have a lot of participants and you have a lot of engagements. Because imagine this, right? With a tiny laptop or tablets, right? How many of us could actually capture the facial expressions, the body language, which are often, that is the key to understanding communications, right? You need to read beyond the text, beyond the audio, right? So these elements, right? How do we capture that in the workplace? I think it's often one of the elements that we often discuss with our clients, because this is actually very important for them, right? When you are doing your client engagements, right? You are going to sign a contract that is multi-billion dollars. You want to make sure that you capture all these elements, all these nuances in meetings, right? And now you could do that with LED display, right? In Samsung, we introduced the wall for business, right? It comes with multiple form factors. That actually brings up a lot of possibilities for corporates, right? Previously, in order to have a 4K display in a corporate settings, you need to have a wall that at least 300 inch, right? But with wall for business, we can actually shrink that screen down to 146 inch, a comfortable 146 inch, yet it could deliver that 4K UHD resolutions, right? I think there's a lot of possibilities what we can do. It doesn't limit you to have like a 16:9. Nowadays, if like you mentioned about 49-inch monitor for a workstation, why not a 32:9 LED for boardroom? I've seen it deployed. It works very nicely for C-level engagement, whereby at the left screen, it's all the faces, and at the right screen is for document sharing and whatnot, right? I think this is a new behavior that will be picked up by the workplace, as well as testing. I can't agree more with Tom. I think that's the reason why people come to Samsung. We allow our clients to do a lot of testings, right? In a platform like this, our Enterprise Briefing Center, EBC, we could work with our partners, bring in third-party solutions, integrate that with Samsung Display, and make sure that we deliver a value to our customers in terms of the whole experience.
Yeah. I think just building upon that as well, part of the frictionless experience, our clients now are asking us, and you know, we're embarking on a couple of projects which folds in elements of this. There's a level of automation that needs to go into the setup of meeting catering for the remote audience and remote workers as well. Around the world, and in our industry, not everyone can afford the luxury of a dedicated team who's going to be there to set up and make sure that the meeting is running well. So we're working with our clients to ensure that the commencement of a meeting, getting that video conference up and running, getting the audio conference up and running, it's practically self-service.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, everyone has been dragged kicking and screaming into the IT world now, the technology world, because of what's happened in the events of this year.
Yeah.
So folks should be a lot more comfortable in terms of that kind of automation. Some of the things that we're talking to our clients and asking them to consider now as well are things like best practice to make sure that there's a professional outcome from an audio perspective. As I said before, making sure that people are audible, making sure that we're not sat behind a window, so that's a very poor visual experience. And these are just some of the things to consider when working from home. Cultural best practice as well as technology.
Yeah, let me press you on that a little bit, Tom. You're in the business of integrating technology and space and people together. Jakis mentioned something very interesting, which is your next meeting room actually going to be a recording studio? What are your clients asking for? What are your discussions like going with them? Where do you think the meeting room is headed? Where do you think the office space is headed in the future?
No, it's a really good question. There's a really good point that Jake has made as well. There's a very real possibility, and one of the options that we are exploring with our clients who are willing, to look at those proof of concepts, is seeing, is the future of the meeting room. Is it a recording studio of some description? It will have the capability of recording content, both live, streaming, and for recording now for later consumption, because my clients aren't necessarily able to come in. They've got all this IP, they've got all this knowledge, they've got these new services and the products that they might want to share with their audiences to record offline and distribute out. Absolutely. The meeting spaces of the future, they could be, instead of 4 people sat around a central table, we could be set out, like a panel.
Yeah.
And in that regard, we're facing a recording studio type environment, but we can reconfigure it to be maybe a podcast studio.
Yeah. Jakis and Eric, maybe even expand that further. The office is not just a meeting room. We've got town halls, we've got pantries, we've got open spaces, we've got lobbies. How can these places transform for the future so that they can provide not only function for the people who are working there, but also visitors and client engagement and all these other things that corporate spaces are supposed to do?
Okay, so I think taking client engagement into consideration, before that is like, let's understand a little bit about would the office be now, would everyone be returning back to the office, or would it still be a hybrid workforce, the environment? So, but I think what we do believe that even simple activities like doing a demo in a showroom, what used to be easily set up, may be a challenge in the future. We are not able to predict when the return to office will be norm, right? But we do know that with a lot of uncertainty in the future, we have to be able to prepare, So to engage the client when you're not able to bring the entire internal team to do an effective demo. So obviously we will definitely need to look at larger screens. We will definitely need to look at higher resolutions with better color reproductions to impress the customer, right? Because especially in the cases whereby it is a design critical project, all the more how visually you are able to wow your clients becomes very critical and important. So especially when you look at opportunities whereby your product or services is remote and due to certain restrictions, again, your clients is not able to travel locally on site to view how that visual impact that has been presented to the clients again becomes very critical and important. So I think this lays the foundation for a lot of consideration for organizations and leaders.
Okay, I'll add on to that based on the experience that I got by interfacing with all the clients that I face. In terms of office design, in particular meeting rooms, it's very interesting. We see a growing trend whereby one display is no longer enough, right? Or regular 55-inch for a 6-room seater is no longer enough, right? There's a growing trend to have at least 2 displays, right? Exactly, it can be for client engagement, information sharing with your internal stakeholders. Bare minimum, you need 2 screens, at least a 55 or 65-inch, built in with a video conferencing tools. I think this kind of like the de facto requirements that come to us to actually build up the telecommuting within internal stakeholders as well as your external clients, right? But I think I would like to bring it one step higher, whereby what we see here, pre-COVID, we see a lot of requests for building a wow factor for the office space, right? To make sure there's engagements, there is a alignment with the office culture, energy level, right? All this creativity within space. But for post-pandemics, we actually see a swing towards more functionality, right? For example, like we need always-on information to remind people about safe distancing. What is the protocols required, right? What are the good reminders to make sure that of your personal hygiene, right? So I think these are the big changes that we see while engaging our clients who want to redesign their office, right? As well as with regards to recording, because that is, I think, the trend moving forward. The number of MICE activities in this region especially will drop significantly, right? And for brands, even like Samsung, in order to engage our customers and clients, we need to do it via digital means, right? How do we enable the experience? How do we minimize the gap of having the loss in translation? I said this before. How to make sure that we shun our branding, shun our messaging right to the customers. I think visual tools are necessary, right? So yes, I think there will be a growing trend whereby a meeting room will be converted into sales or marketing tools to actually communicate to customers with a proper digital means.
Yeah. I think, so to add a little bit to what Eric mentioned there, at the beginning you talked about multiple camera angles within a space. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that, it's really interesting that you said that. You know, we're on a project at the moment with a client who's considering that, where to keep that engagement with the remote audience, should we, you know, for some reason, you know, switch over to the side and start talking, it's possible for those cameras, automated as well, to pick up a face and therefore, you know, flick to that view. Right. And, you know, quite frankly, the technology to do that kind of thing and to make it automated, it's out there. And right. It's very, very feasible for that to be done. But again, it comes back to the fact that you have to have a coherent strategy around it to introduce that kind of tech into the environment. And there's organizational things to consider, there's the people side of things to consider, and of course the technology side of things to consider as well. Because a frictionless experience involves multiple integrations. You know, if I want to walk into a space to kick off a meeting, to get, you know, that high resolution experience, to share that document, that frictionless part, maybe just, you know, tapping my phone to register that I'm there, face detection to register that I'm there, or from my ID card or some kind of NFC device. But that's integrating with multiple systems, you know, security systems, my Active Directory, and then into the control system of the room itself, mm-hmm. You know, and the display solution. And do we dim the lights? Do we half lower the curtains as well? You can see a strategy and integration is very, very important. A strategy around the integration, sorry.
Yeah, definitely. There seems to be a lot of work that needs to be done on the testing side, translating user experience and how people actually interact with technology into best practices. Yeah. And all of this work needs to be done together, right? We'll need you, we'll need the technology providers, we'll need obviously the operators, the end users to all come together, sit down, and come to a consensus, so to speak. Gentlemen, it's been a very, very, very fruitful discussion. A lot of interesting topics have been raised. We would now like to hear from you. We'll be taking a short 90-second break. Our panelists can have a drink of water, and then we will be back to answer your questions.
The global disruption in year 2020 has significantly accelerated digital transformation across industries. Organizations, big or small, have to adapt, move fast, and stay agile. From online tools to collaboration technology for remote working, to giving day-to-day tools a digital upgrade, companies are seeking new ways to communicate with customers and stakeholders in this disrupted world. Here at Samsung, we understand the urgency for workplace transformation, and we would like to help. Together with our partners, we are transforming workplace through display solutions. An effective digital transformation strategy is needed to pave a new workplace of the future. We would like to invite you to explore how Samsung Display Solutions can be your partner in transforming your workplace. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy.
And we're back. Gentlemen, we have our first question from the audience. With COVID-19 disruption, corporates are looking to restrict spend. Obviously, austerity and reduction in expenditure is a big push for a lot of people. And one of the things this person is seeing is a shift from CapEx to OpEx in terms of spending. How does this impact the AV industry, and how does this impact the procurement of technology solutions? I'd like to throw it to you guys.
Well, from our perspective, we have seen this in some of our projects, and our clients are asking about it. Not necessarily, going in two-footed, but it's something that is one of the options that they're considering. One of the bits of advice that we always reflect back, what our role as consultants is to sometimes challenge our clients, is if you're talking from shifting things from a CapEx to an OpEx model, for AV specifically, the questions that we always ask back is organizationally, who owns AV? Organizationally, are you ready to have a BAU team who can run that AV for you? Because we have been in situations where elements of AV, sitting on network cabling, belong to IT, but other parts of an AV solution, the displays, the control panel, is supported by potentially facilities. Who aren't necessarily technology SMEs, although facilities are getting so much improvement in that area. So we often reflect that question back. Organizationally, are you ready for it? Because as I said before, solution providers out there, they are ready to provide these kind of services. It's eminently possible. As an organization, are you ready for it?
So I think to add to what Tom mentioned, I think this question has been asked even before COVID. There has always been a lot of requests, can solutions be deployed using an OpEx model? So I like to think that it is not about, the importance is not about whether is it a CapEx or OpEx model. It is really about is the solutions post-COVID effective? Does it remain valid, or does it address the requirements of the effective workforce? So, but I understand that this question probably comes about from the view that during this pandemic period, a lot of budgets has been put on hold, a lot of budgets has been reduced, or a lot of budgets may have been reallocated. So, but I like to think that the pandemic actually has shifted or accelerated digitization of the work environment. So in fact, for organizations to remain competitive or to stay competitive, they have to accelerate the digitization of the workforce, of the workspace, right? So if leaders now understand or even feel for themselves in the past few months how digitization is going to give them the advantage or benefit, all the more they would relook into or prioritize the spending for the AV setup for the workforce. So as I mentioned, we are now down to two very important sensors, which is sound and sight. So how the AV industry is able to support the effectiveness and the productivity of the new hybrid workforce is very important. Yeah. So I think we have to present the case to the leadership of organizations.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Like we were almost caught unawares by the pandemic. Workspaces weren't prepared, right? But we've been through it once, and we need to be prepared. Let's say if in the future it happens again, or we have another seismic event that causes massive disruption. And technology is definitely going to be one of the key factors in preparing us, and that means you have to invest. Eric, your thoughts?
So I think my thoughts is similar to Jacob's, but the way I see it, the impact to the AV industry is that we will start to see more customers keen to jump into all this technology available by not investing on capex, but they are willing to try now, right? Because they know they need to digitalize certain workflow, certain routine, talk about safe entry, right? Temperature control, traffic control, right? They know to a certain extent they need it, but they are not sure how long do we need it, right? But at least it's a stepping stone for all these end users, corporate end users, to actually know that such solution exists, and it helps to mitigate certain risks to operate post-COVID working environment, right? And in terms of the manufacturers and system integrators, I think it's a good opportunity whereby we could actually be more creative to deliver off-the-shelf solutions by combining different solution, display, video conferencing tools, portable stands, and package it as a off-the-shelf or rental. I think it's wonderful, right? But so I think the capex opex definitely will stir some impact to the industry. But overall, I think it's a beneficial for the AV industry. Yeah.
We'll shift over to the second question, which is specifically targeting the corporate vertical, and more specifically, banks and other financial institutions. These have always been good clients for AV and for technology uptake. The question asks, what is the display strategy going to be in these banks and financial institutes, all the way from big LED video walls to whiteboards and collaboration tools and monitors on desks? What do you guys see right now in the market? What are your predictions?
Okay, so maybe I can take this question. I think when we look in terms of the finance industry, one very important criteria to look at is a security. So with the shift of the workforce becoming hybrid, there's going to be a lot of mobility. So I think with increased mobility, we are talking about security, increased need for security. So when we look in terms of smart monitors, as I mentioned, is like the seamless utilization of engagement tools. Needs to be able to turn on the spot without compromising security. So potential solutions may be cloud-based now. When we look in terms of interactive whiteboard, again, it is not about having the ability to write on the board, but is what is the compatible solutions that is secured, that is seamless, that is cloud-based. When we look in terms of LED, the potential for LED now becomes more critical and more engaging, simply because the way that you engage your clients now becomes even more precious, becomes even more important for every opportunity they're going to meet them. So what used to be a daily meeting may now becomes once a month or maybe once a year opportunity. So the reduced interaction increase the need to impress. So I think this is what will be the changes in the finance industry. So any comments, Tom?
Well, a lot of our clients are in the financial services, and just going back to an earlier point that we all discussed, we think from a display perspective, we are seeing a trend, and we are seeing a lot of demand in terms of converting spaces into a recording studio-like environment, because even internal comms is going to be so important now, as well as engaging with wealth management clients and that kind of thing. As Jake has said, the space is there to impress, but elevating that recording studio experience to make sure that it's a professional outcome, that's a trend that we're seeing, and obviously displays are going to be a huge part of that. Yeah, recording studio trends is something that we're definitely seeing in the banking sector.
Right. We'll jump on to the next question. It seems to be from someone who is actually working on a project, because the question they're asking is, what is the sweet spot for the wall business from Samsung for deployment in a corporate setting? I'll broaden that question a little bit. Tom, maybe you could kick us off with how you start conceptualizing the display for a space, and then Jacobs and Eric, maybe you can expand a little bit more about the difference the wall can make.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's a very exciting time to be in our industry, but there are still things that aren't going to change. Some clients, some businesses, they still need that impact space. They still need that place to welcome visitors, attract talent, retain talent, and there's going to be those areas where you need to have that jaw-dropping wow experience. So there will always be a place for that, and we work with our clients to understand, and also the project teams, to understand those business requirements, and from a technology perspective, giving advice for the best place to put that, take into account industry best practice in terms of AV design elements, the IT cabling elements, again bearing in mind some of the flexible needs that people have now and wireless technologies out there. Yeah, we work with our clients to design that accordingly.
Jacobs and
Yeah,
Eric?
I think when we look in terms of the wall business deployment as a sweet spot, the first question really is about the cost of a real estate. When we look in the possibility of having to set up a studio now in a corporate environment, I do not think that the corporates will want to pay more for a large recording or broadcasting studio. So obviously turning a small meeting room into a potential studio will require screens that are of higher resolution but of a lower pitch, having that high or excellent color clarity or reproduction becomes important. So the wall would very likely fit into some of this area. But I have to say as well, from what we see in the market, even pre-COVID situation, we saw that the opportunities to impress customers on large deals opportunities. So I think obviously one of this industry will be the property industry, whereby property developers will be looking to impress, to wow clients with the clarity or the visual impressiveness of the wall display. So these are all the potential area. I think maybe Eric can add on to more examples of where these wall opportunities can be deployed on.
Right, thank you, Jacobs. Exactly what you said, the wall serve a very special purpose. Of course, the wow factor for enterprises, for corporates, as a visual brand identity, right? To deliver that in digital format, they need to have a tool that well represented their brand colors, the energy level, the contents, right? And in order to deliver that, you will need to have a display like LED, wall LED, the wall, to actually able to pronounce that really well visually, right? So I think sweet spot, those that I've seen is normally the innovation centers for MNCs, right? Demo centers, because when you want to show your products well, in terms of the right color representations, the good contrast, right, without any reflections, the wall is the right product to go, right? But moving on to more functional purpose of the wall, we actually see a lot of application in boardrooms, right? Even now, where if there is this is cutting specific sectors, including governments, whereby you have to have that constant communication almost 24/7 with your counterparts. It can be a bilateral or regional, international, video call all the time. You will need to have a LED display that have fault tolerance mechanism built in place, right? So the wall kind of like fit that purpose because it actually comes with a remote power failure. So in case certain things, power supply is not working, it will be able to back up really fast, right? So that kind of like innovation that we injected into the wall allows it to be expand into more visuals, more impactful, wow factor to more functional for video conferencing purpose, for remote collaboration purpose.
Just one thing I wanted to add to Jacob's recording studio point. It's not necessarily the case that converting a space into having recording studio functionality is really expensive. It's not necessarily that case. You know, on a couple of our projects, we're working with clients to talk about multiple tiers of cost from a recording studio in a box, all the way up to a mobile kind of solution, up to a permanent solution where a place can be dedicated and customized to have that kind of functionality. But with the prosumer technology out there, with people's expertise and understanding elevated because of the events of this year, it's eminently possible to produce a recording studio like experience, without breaking the bank. But just make sure that it folds into a medium, longer term strategy, including making sure that the integration is considered as well.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been lovely talking to you. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. We're coming to you live from the EBC in Singapore. There are multiple different EBCs here. Eric, could you quickly name a few regions where EBCs exist so that if people want to visit, they can go ahead and book an appointment?
Right. So basically, worldwide, whenever there's a Samsung Display Business office, there will be an Enterprise Briefing Center EBC in that country. For this part of the world, especially, we have all 8 countries, Southeast Asia countries where we are, including Australia and New Zealand. Right.
Excellent.
So
Audience?
if I can just add on to the EBC, I think the EBC has a very importance for the entire ecosystem as well as for end users. We are very happy to welcome any partnership or any of testing requirement that you believe to be the requirement of the workforce or the workspace required for the future. So I think even for the EBC that is set up in Singapore, it has been set up to be very open. It has been set up to be very easy for connectivity with different devices. So what we really want to do is to ensure compatibility testing of different devices in the experience setup, that for customers when doing the deployment, it will be similar to the exact of what they experience in the EBC as well. So I think with that, we work very closely with key partners and the experts in the industry like Tom to ensure that the experience that we propose to the customers is exactly what is being seen here.
Yeah, definitely. As you can see, the Samsung team is very willing to help you out. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. If we couldn't get to your questions, there should be some information up on screen regarding Samsung's socials and where you could reach out to them for more information. Once again, thank you, panelists. It was lovely chatting to you. And audience, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Thank you.